Hey, critical analysis. Welcome to your very last chapter vocabulary video. We are now in the last week of the semester. This is chapter 10, your last set of brand new words. So we have made it. So you'll be going into your week 8 folder and your fill-in folder. You can see that there are 2 vocabulary guides in this week. Chapter 10, which is the one that this video is focused on, and then chapter 6 through 10, because you have your 6 through 10 vocabulary test this week, very similarly modeled after your 1 through 5 vocabulary test. So really no surprises there, and hopefully you, because it was just literally a few weeks ago, hopefully you remember the format and all of that, but that will be its own separate video. All right, so you'll click on the chapter 10 study guide, you'll get your blank copy right here. And then as always, I'm going to use my copy right here as we go through. All right, so what's a little unique about chapter 10 words is this entire side right here and a few on the other side come from the chapter, just sprinkled throughout the chapter. They're not necessarily in one of the readings. They're used multiple times throughout the chapter based on the concepts of the chapter. So you're going to see these within like your PowerPoint, within the lecture video. If you have not watched that already, you're going to see them within the chapter pages when you go through and read chapter 10. They're all concepts that relate to chapter 10, and they're things that'll be in your critical thinking mastery skill as well. So you might see a few of those words pop up in there. So because of that, you'll see like the page numbers are not necessarily all in one area because they're from different parts of the book, although a lot of them do in fact focus right around, we go here, like right around page 528 or so. You're going to see a lot of them in context through step 3. There's going to be a lot of them pop up in here. Okay, so just that's kind of where you're going to see them, and that's why of course the page numbers are there so you can see where they are inside the text. So let's go ahead and go through these. So again, these are all chapter 10 related words. They relate directly to the content of chapter 10 with the lecture portion. So you're going to hear those if you haven't already watched the video or looked at the PowerPoint. You're going to see those in there. All right, so an analogy is comparison of 2 things. So when you make an analogy, you are trying to compare 2 or more things. You know, whenever a lot of times like SAT prep, that kind of thing, they work on analogies, like this is to that. And so you're trying to compare things. If you even, I mean, it's always fun to do that. Examples of analogies. You'll see that some of them are similes. Hammer is to nail, as comb is to hair. Sometimes it's more basic like that. So it's kind of a mixture. Sometimes it might be more of that figurative language analogy, like we talked about in a previous chapter, figurative language, or they're literally making these comparisons. A hammer is to a nail as comb is to hair. So it can kind of go a couple different ways, but that's what an analogy is when you're comparing 2 things. Deduction is when you form a conclusion and use data to support it. So it's almost like if you're thinking of a main idea, it has the main idea stated first. It's the most general idea, and then it moves to specific details. So you start with your overall conclusion, and then you give the specific details to support it. Argument is just an assertion, and then you try to support it. You try to persuade someone to believe that. You give them facts or statistics or examples or scenarios, whatever that might look like, to make people believe your argument. Fallacy is something that appears reasonable, but after you kind of look at it, it's really not. It's illogical, unrelated, or unreliable. So if we take a look, there are a bunch of fallacies. Look at all of these. These are all fallacy examples. So for instance, like a fallacy example might be bandwagon, saying that everyone is doing this, and so you should do it too. That's a fallacy because clearly not everyone is doing that. There's some things called, we'll go down here, misinterpreted statistics. Sometimes people can twist statistics to kind of come out in their favor. That's a fallacy. Sometimes you might overgeneralize something so that you are trying to see like it applies to everything when it really really doesn't. Sometimes a fallacy is appealing to emotions, but you can see like there's a whole list of different types of fallacies there. So that's what a fallacy is. Like at first it might seem, okay, that makes sense, but then it's like, well, wait a minute, something's not quite right about this. An assertion is just a statement usually used when you're trying to, get your argument across or get your point of view across. Induction then is the opposite of deduction. Induction is when you have all of the data, all the specifics first, and then you form your conclusion. So it's like in a main idea, when the main idea is at the very end of the paragraph, has all the details, and then you summarize with your main idea. Believability is how likely is this to be true? How likely can you believe it? In the case, they're talking about like arguments. Premise is the supporting points, like you have your argument and then you say, okay, here's my premise. Here are all the points that are going to support this argument. Conclusion is the position, like what did you arrive at? Like here's all your data, here's all the examples, opinions, stats. What conclusion did you reach? What did you arrive at? And this is what you do when you write, W-R-I-T-E, right? This is when you come to a conclusion. If you're doing like a persuasive essay or you're trying to really get your point across, you have that conclusion paragraph. Relevance is how on topic or connected is the information you're presenting, how related, how connected. And then the last two that are connected to the chapter 10 concepts, consistency over and over and over again. That's really important specifically in like scientific experiments. Like how consistent is this? If I do this, is it going to be the same over and over? And then reliability, can I depend on this to be accurate? Is it trustworthy? How can I take this information and really make sure it is unbiased and I can trust what it's saying? All right, the rest of these come from the vocabulary booster. So you can see like a lot of them are phrases derived from other languages. So if we go down here to vocabulary booster, you'll see a lot of them written just word for word right here. So I'll just go through them. So we have déjà vu. You've probably heard of this before. The feeling like you've done something already or you've seen something already. Like you do something all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, this seems really familiar. That's a sense of déjà vu. Double entendre. Double entendre is when you say something and it can allow for two interpretations. One of them straightforward, like this is exactly what I mean. And the other one kind of off color. Good example of this, I don't know if any of you are the fans of The Office. Michael Scott, the main character, likes to use the phrase, that's what she said, after anything that could potentially be interpreted as sexual. So for instance, there's a line in the show that says, she always left me satisfied. And it was not necessarily about anything, off color, but Michael immediately goes, that's what she said. So it was a double entendre. It was meant one thing, pretty innocent, and then he took it and kind of turned it into a little bit more off color. So that's a double entendre. Esprit de corps, that means group spirit or pride. So like think of like school spirit, like a group of people who all support very similar things. Potpourri, I know some people think of like the scents, and that's true because if you think about potpourri, it's a mixture of different different types of scents, different types of things that smell nicely. So potpourri is mixture. So let's say you have a group of people, you might have a potpourri of ideas, a mixture of ideas. Depending on how you want to pronounce this, junta or junta, a group of political plotters, people who are trying to maybe make change, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not so peacefully. Sotto voce is a whisper, so it's like under, like you're quiet. Sotto voce, very quiet whisper. Vendetta, this is like revenge, like feud. It literally means like blood feud, out to get someone. And then al fresco, maybe you have heard of this, like when you go out to eat somewhere, you want to eat al fresco, like fresh air outside. All right, those are your chapter 10 vocabulary words, and you will be completing the chapter 10 vocabulary quiz, and you'll see that in your chapter 10 assignment video. Bye.